When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I don't know why I smiled. Maybe it was the only thing I could do to stop my heart from breaking right there in front of her. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind of day when the sunlight looks soft and warm through the kitchen window. I had just finished folding the laundry, her husband's shirts, my son's shirts, and I was humming a little tune from my younger days. The smell of fabric softener still filled the air when she came in. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were cold. "Mom," she said, "I think it's time you go back to your own place." Those words hung in the air like heavy rain clouds. I thought maybe I measured her, maybe she meant a vacation or a short break, but no, she looked right at me, standing there with her cup of coffee, as if I were someone she barely knew. It's strange how silence can be louder than shouting. I remember feeling the room shrink around me. The refrigerator hummed softly. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, but inside, it was just me, and the echo of her words. I didn't argue, I didn't ask why. I didn't want to make my son choose, so I smiled, a small, tired smile that said, "It's okay, I understand." But deep down, I didn't understand. How could I? After all the years of raising him, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, I never imagined that one day I would be asked to leave the very home I helped build. That night, I packed my things quietly. I folded my clothes the way I always did. I even left a little note on the fridge that said, "Take care of each other." Then, before sunrise, I walked out with my small suitcase and didn't look back. On the bus ride home, I stared out the window. My reflection looked older than I remembered. My hands resting on my lap trembled slightly. The world outside kept moving, children laughing, people rushing to work, as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. That was the day I realized something no one ever tells you. Sometimes family doesn't end with a fight. Sometimes it ends with quiet words and a polite smile. And that's how the story began. The day my own daughter-in-law turned me into a stranger, I was never the kind of mother who demanded much. I came from a small town in Ohio, where people lived simple lives and loved quietly. My husband, God rest his soul, used to say that peace was found in small things: a clean kitchen, a warm dinner, a kind word. We didn't have much money, but we had love, and that was enough. When our son Daniel was born, he became the center of our world. He was a quiet child, gentle and thoughtful. He used to hold my hand even when he was already too old to, and every night before sleeping, he'd whisper, "Good night, Mom. I love you." That's the kind of boy he was, soft-spoken, kind, and full of heart. We raised him to be respectful, to be honest, to work hard, and he did. He studied late into the night, worked part-time jobs, and eventually made it through college on scholarships and determination. His father and I were so proud. We'd sit in our small living room, holding each other's hands, talking about how bright his future looked. When my husband passed away, Daniel was already living in the city. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I remember lying awake at night, listening to the old clock tick, and wondering what to do with my days. That's when Daniel started calling me more often. "Mom, you should come stay with me for a while," he said once. I hesitated. I didn't want to be a burden. But he insisted, and his voice had that familiar warmth that made me feel needed again. When I moved into his home, I tried to be helpful. I cooked. I cleaned. I watered the plants. I made sure he had his favorite meals ready when he came home, and when he introduced me to Emma, his fiancée at the time, I was so happy for him. She was polite, pretty, and spoke softly. She said she loved Daniel for his heart, not for his job or money. I believed her. I truly did. The wedding was simple and beautiful. I cried quietly as I watched them say their vows. Daniel looked so happy. I remember thinking, now my boy has someone to take care of him. My job is done. But life has a strange way of testing your peace. In the beginning, everything was fine. We shared meals together, laughed at TV shows, and took evening walks. Emma would ask me about recipes, and I'd teach her the ones Daniel grew up loving. She'd smile and say, "You're such a good cook, Mom." Those words warmed my heart. I felt like maybe I'd gained a daughter, not lost a son. But small things began to change, quiet, almost invisible things. She started closing the kitchen door when she cooked. She began doing laundry early in the morning before I could help. When guests came over, she would introduce me as Daniel's mother, never Mom. At first, I thought it was just habit, but habits, when repeated, become walls. I noticed how Daniel's tone softened around her, but turned cautious when he spoke to me. like he didn't want to upset anyone. That's when I realized a mother's love might be unconditional, but a son's heart is sometimes divided. One evening, I was setting the table for dinner when Emma came in. She looked tired but determined, like she had rehearsed something in her mind. "Mom," she said gently, "you don't have to cook tonight. I already ordered takeout." I smiled. "That's all right, dear. I enjoy cooking," but she frowned slightly. "I just think it's time we manage things differently. You should rest more. Let us handle things." I nodded, even though her words felt like a soft push, a reminder that this wasn't my home anymore. That night, I went to bed early. I could hear them laughing softly in the living room, their voices mixing with the sound of the TV. I turned to the wall and whispered myself, "Don't be selfish. They're happy. That's what matters." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing, something small but real. She began rearranging the kitchen, moving the plates and spoons I had organized. She changed the curtains I had chosen. She even put away the framed picture of Daniel and me from the living room shelf, saying it didn't match the decor. I found it later in a drawer. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, but it hurt more than I wanted to admit. One morning, Daniel mentioned they were thinking about turning the spare room, my room, into a home office. He said it kindly, almost hesitantly. "Mom, we just thought maybe you could stay in the guest room for a while. It'll be temporary." I smiled and agreed, because what else could I say? I didn't want to cause trouble. I moved my things quietly that night, my clothes, my books, my memories. I told myself it didn't matter which room I was in, as long as I was near my son, I was home. But in my heart, I knew I was slowly becoming a guest. When the holidays came, I tried to bring back the warmth. I cooked all of Daniel's favorite dishes: mashed potatoes, roast chicken, apple pie. I even wrapped little gifts for both of them. But that evening, Emma's parents came over too, and suddenly I was just another person at the table. They talked and laughed, shared stories about their family trips, while I smiled and nodded quietly. No one asked about me. No one remembered the stories I once told. After dinner, as I washed the dishes alone, I heard Emma say from the living room, "Your mom means well, but I think she needs her own space." Her words were soft, but they found their way straight into my chest. Daniel didn't respond right away. I wanted to believe he would defend me, but then I heard him sigh. "Maybe you're right," he said. "She's been through a lot. Maybe being on her own would be better." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I thought about all the mothers who gave everything for their children and how quiet the world becomes when those children no longer need them. It wasn't anger I felt. It was emptiness, like someone had slowly taken pieces of my heart without realizing it. I looked around the room, the folded quilts, the framed wedding picture, the little plant on the windowsill. Everything looked peaceful, yet nothing felt like home anymore. That was the beginning of the distance. Not one big argument, not a fight, just small silences that grew into walls. It's strange how change happens so quietly. No one announces it. There's no thunder, no sudden break. It begins with small things, a look, a pause, a word left unsaid. Before you realize it, the air in the house feels different, colder, thinner. Like you have to be careful with every breath. In the months that followed, I started noticing more of those small things. The coffee mugs I used were moved to a different cabinet. The chair I usually sat in during breakfast was suddenly taken by Emma's new plants. She filled the windowsill with them, small pots of green life, fresh and lovely. But as they grew, they took over the sunlight that used to fall on my side of the table. And somehow that tiny shadow made me feel replaced. One morning, I overheard Emma on the phone. She was talking to her friend, her voice soft but a little impatient. "She's sweet," she said, "but it's hard, you know. I just want my own space, my own rhythm." She paused, then added quietly, "I didn't sign up for living with his mom forever." Her words weren't cruel. They were just honest, but sometimes honesty can cut deeper than anger. I remember standing by the door, holding a basket of folded towels, feeling suddenly like an intruder in my son's home. I wanted to walk in and smile, to act as if I hadn't heard anything, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, realizing that no matter how kind she was on the surface, I had become a problem to solve. That evening, when Daniel came home, I made his favorite stew, the one with carrots and slow-cooked beef, the one I used to make when he was a boy. He smiled, took a bite, and said, "Mom, this tastes like home." My heart swelled for a moment, but then Emma looked up and said, "We should probably start eating lighter, Danny. Less red meat, Remember, he nodded quickly, setting his spoon down. Yeah, you're right. And just like that, the warmth I felt vanished. I smiled again, because that's what mothers do. But inside, something small began to crumble. After dinner, I washed the dishes alone. The sound of running water covered my thoughts. I looked at my hands, the same hands that once held him as a baby, wiped his tears, packed his lunches. Now they just scrub plates in a quiet kitchen that didn't belong to me anymore. Days passed like that. The house was filled with laughter, but none of it felt like it reached me. I became careful not to move things, not to speak too much, not to disturb their rhythm. I stayed mostly in my room, knitting, reading, waiting for the sound of the front door when Daniel came home. I told myself it was temporary, that Emma would get used to me, that love in time would soften the edges. But instead, the distance grew. One Sunday, I woke up early and made breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, and coffee. I thought it would be nice to surprise them. But when they came downstairs, Daniel looked surprised, and Emma looked uncomfortable. Oh, she said with a polite smile. We're actually going out for brunch with friends today. I froze, spatula in hand. Oh, I didn't know. That's all right, I said, forcing a smile. We didn't want to bother you. Daniel added quickly, you deserve to rest, Mom. A rest. That word again. I'd been hearing it a lot lately. You should rest, Mom. You've done enough, Mom. Let us handle it, Mom. Each time they said it, it sounded kind. But each time I heard something else. You're not needed anymore. They left. And I sat at the table with 2 empty plates and a pot of untouched coffee. I stared at the syrup bottle and thought about how strange it felt to be surrounded by love and still feel invisible. That afternoon, I tried calling one of my old friends, Martha. She was my neighbor for 20 years before I moved in with Daniel. Her voice was warm like always. Oh, honey, she said, you sound tired. Are you all right? I'm fine, I lied. Just adjusting. We talked about small things, her garden, her grandkids, the new church pastor. But when we hung up, I felt the silence close in again. That was when I started writing in my old notebook, not a diary, just thoughts. Little things I couldn't say out loud. One entry read, I am a guest in the house I once dreamed my son would build. Another kindness without warmth feels colder than silence. One evening, Daniel came home late from work. I waited up for him just like I used to when he was young. When he walked in, I smiled and said, you must be hungry. But before he could answer, Emma appeared behind him. Frowning softly, Mom, you didn't have to wait up, she said. You should really sleep earlier. I hesitated, then nodded. I just wanted to see you both. Daniel hugged me briefly. We're fine, Mom. You should take care of yourself, okay? They went upstairs, and I sat on the couch, listening to their footsteps fade away. I realized then that love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, gently, until all that's left is memory. Weeks later, Emma suggested hiring a cleaning service. You don't have to do everything anymore, she said sweetly. I smiled, but inside I thought, then what am I here for? One afternoon, I made a small mistake. I forgot to turn off the stove after warming some soup. Nothing serious. The flame was low, and I caught it quickly. But Emma saw it. Mom, you could have burned the house down, she exclaimed, her voice sharper than usual. You need to be more careful. Daniel came into the kitchen, concerned. What happened? Nothing, I said quickly. It's fine, I just forgot. But Emma wasn't done. It's not fine, you could have hurt yourself. Maybe it's time she stopped, glancing at Daniel. Time we what? I asked softly. She hesitated, then forced a smile. Nothing, Mom. I just think you should relax more. That night, I sat by the window and watched the city lights. I could feel something shifting, like the ground beneath me was no longer solid. I wasn't angry. I was just tired of pretending I didn't notice, tired of walking on eggshells in a house that used to echo with my son's laughter. Then came the day that broke my heart a little more. It was a Sunday morning, and I was folding laundry in the living room. Emma walked in, holding her phone. She looked nervous but determined. Mom, she said gently, can we talk? Of course, I said, smiling. What's on your mind? She sat down across from me, her hands clasped. You know we love you, right? I nodded, though something inside me tightened. Whenever someone starts with those words, what follows is never good. It's just, she hesitated. Daniel and I were thinking it might be better for everyone if you had your own space. Maybe you could stay at your old house again, or somewhere closer to your friends. For a moment, I couldn't speak. She went on softly. You deserve peace, Mom, privacy. And we need to start our own life too. Her words were careful, like she'd practiced them. I smiled, a habit by now. Of course, I understand. Daniel walked in just then, looking uncomfortable. Mom, we just think it's the best thing for everyone. I looked at my son, my little boy, who once cried if I wasn't there when he woke up, and now here he was, grown and kind, but so far away from the boy I remembered. I could see he didn't want to hurt me. But sometimes love hurts even when it's trying not to. I said, I'll start packing tomorrow. Mom, he started, but I raised my hand gently. It's all right. I know you both need space. Emma looked relieved. She smiled, maybe thinking I'd taken it well, and I suppose on the outside I did. But inside, a quiet ache spread through me. Not anger, not resentment, just deep, wordless sadness. That night, I sat in my small room surrounded by half-packed boxes. I touched the framed photo of Daniel as a child, the one I had rescued from the drawer. I whispered, "You'll understand one day, my boy, when someone makes your heart their home and then asks you to leave." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, watching the faint glow of the streetlights on the wall. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, that small, uncertain smile he gave me when I said I understood. I wondered if he believed me, maybe he wanted to. Maybe that made it easier for him. By dawn, I had already packed most of my things. A few clothes, some books, the framed photo of Daniel's graduation day, and my husband's watch, the one that had stopped ticking years ago, but I could never bring myself to throw away. I moved slowly, quietly, not wanting to wake them. Every fold of clothing, every drawer closed felt like the closing of a chapter I hadn't planned to end. In the kitchen, I made coffee one last time. The smell filled the air, just like it used to when Daniel was little. I poured myself a small cup and stood by the window looking at the soft morning light. The world outside looked calm, birds on the wire, a neighbor walking their dog, a boy on a bicycle. Life goes on, I thought. It always does, even when our hearts don't keep up. Emma came downstairs first. She was dressed neatly, her hair tied up, the way she always liked to start her mornings. When she saw the packed suitcase by the door, she hesitated. "Oh," she said softly. "You're really gonna day?" I smiled, even though my throat tightened. "Yes, dear, I thought it would be better this way. You and Daniel can have your space." She nodded, looking relieved, but trying to hide it. "I didn't mean to rush you, Mom. It's just, you know how things can be. I understand." I said, though a part of me wished she would say she didn't want me to go. But that moment never came. Daniel came down a few minutes later, half asleep, his tie still loose. When he saw the suitcase, his eyes widened. "Mom, you're leaving already. You didn't even wait for breakfast? I thought it would be easier this way," I said softly. "No goodbyes." He ran a hand through his hair. "You could have told me. I would have taken the day off, driven you. I didn't want to trouble you," I replied. "It's just a short bus ride." He looked at me for a long time, as if trying to read what I wasn't saying. I smiled, like always. That small, tired smile that hid more than it showed. He hugged me briefly, warm but distant. "Call me when you get home, okay?" "I will," I whispered. Emma came over and handed me a small brown bag. "Some sandwiches for the trip," she said. "And water." I took it with both hands. "Thank you, dear. You're thoughtful." But inside, I wanted to say, "It's not the sandwiches I need. It's your kindness, your warmth, your heart." Instead, I picked up my suitcase and looked around the house one last time. The living room looked the same, but different. The new furniture, the clean lines, the smell of candles instead of old wood, everything looked perfect. But the laughter that once filled it had changed its sound. It no longer had my echo in it. "Take care of each other," I said softly, and then, before my heart could break open, I walked out the door. The morning air was crisp. The bus stop was only 2 blocks away, but each step felt heavier than the last. I could still see their window from the corner, Daniel standing behind the curtain, watching. I lifted my hand slightly, a small wave. He didn't wave back, but maybe he didn't see me. I told myself that to keep the tears away. At the bus stop, I sat with my suitcase beside me. The world was busy already. People rushing, phones ringing, cars honking. No one knew that an old woman sitting quietly on the bench was leaving a part of her life behind. I held my husband's old watch in my palm and whispered, "I did my best." When the bus arrived, I climbed on slowly. The driver smiled and said, "Good morning." "Good morning," I replied, though my voice trembled. I sat by the window, holding the paper bag Emma had given me. I didn't open it. I just looked out, watching the city blur into small towns, then fields. The world passing by looked peaceful, but inside me was a quiet storm, not of anger, but of memories. I thought about the years that brought me here, the lullabies, the scraped knees, the late night talks, the birthday candles. I thought about the day Daniel moved out. How proud I felt. I thought about the nights I prayed for his happiness, never realizing happiness might mean my absence. At one stop, an elderly couple got on the bus. They sat across from me, holding hands. The woman rested her head on the man's shoulder, and he smiled softly at her. I watched them and wondered if I'd ever have that again. Someone to lean on, someone who wouldn't make me feel like I'd overstayed my welcome. When I reached my old town, the air smelled familiar, a mix of pine trees, rain-soaked soil, and memories. My old house, just as I had left it, though a little older, a little dustier. I unlocked the door, and the sound of the latch echoed through the empty rooms. I set down my suitcase, and for the first time in a long time, I cried. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that slipped down without warning, tears that had waited too long to be free. The house was silent. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, the curtains, the framed photos on the wall. My husband's chair was still there, the cushion slightly sunken. I ran my hand over it and whispered, "You'd know what to say, wouldn't you?" I made myself tea, sat by the window, and watched the rain begin to fall. The world outside blurred softly, and I felt like I was fading too. I didn't feel anger toward Emma. Maybe she was right. Maybe she did deserve her own rhythm. Maybe I stayed too long. But love makes you blind to boundaries. A mother never stops believing she belongs. The phone rang that evening. It was Daniel. His voice was gentle but awkward. "Mom, did you get home safely?" "Les, dear," I said. "It's all fine here. Just settling in." There was a pause. "Emma feels bad, you know. She didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "Tell her not to worry. I'll visit soon," he promised. "Take your time," I whispered. "You have your life now." We talked a little more about work, the weather, the new project he was handling. He sounded busy, happy, maybe. I didn't want to make him feel guilty, so I laughed in all the right places, said, "I'm proud of you," like I always did. When we hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. The house felt even quieter after that. Days turned into weeks. I settled into a new rhythm. Morning walks, tending to my small garden, talking to Martha over tea on weekends. But sometimes when I made coffee or folded laundry, I caught myself turning around, expecting to hear Daniel's voice, to see Emma walk in with that polite smile. Then I'd remember they were living their story now. Mine had turned a new page. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived. Inside was a photo, Daniel and Emma smiling in front of their new home with a short note that said, "We finally moved. Hope you visit soon." I looked at the picture for a long time. They looked happy, and that was enough. That had to be enough. I placed the photo on the table beside my husband's old watch. The ticking had stopped years ago, but somehow it felt alive, a symbol of all the moments that once were. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the moon rise over the trees. I whispered, "Maybe this is what motherhood really is, loving enough to let go, even when it hurts." The days that followed were slow, the kind of slow that gives you time to think, to breathe, and sometimes to ache. The house, once filled with voices and footsteps, now echoed with only my own. At first, the silence frightened me. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind through the windows reminded me how empty the rooms were. But as time passed, that silence became something else, not an enemy, but a mirror. It reflected everything I had been too busy, too afraid to face. I started keeping small routines, mornings with tea by the window, afternoons tending the garden behind the house, evenings spent knitting blankets I didn't really need. I'd hum old songs to myself, the ones Daniel used to love as a child. Sometimes I'd forget where I was, and for a fleeting moment, I'd hear his laughter again. It was comforting, even if it wasn't real. Well, one morning I found an old box in the attic. Inside were letters, photographs, little pieces of the life we once had, ticket stubs from family trips, birthday cards Daniel had made for me in school, even my husband's old reading glasses. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by memories, and smiled through the tears. So much love, I thought, so much that never needed to be spoken. That afternoon, Martha came by with a basket of apples from her yard. "Honey, you need to eat better," she said, setting the basket on my counter like she still knew my kitchen as well as her own. I laughed. "You sound like my husband used to." She smiled, pulling up a chair. He was a wise man, God bless him. We sat together, peeling apples and talking about everything and nothing, the way old friends do. She listened quietly as I told her bits of the story, though I softened the details. I didn't want pity, only understanding. When I finished, she placed her hand over mine. You know, sometimes they don't mean to hurt us. They're just trying to live their lives. We raise them to be independent. And when they finally are, it breaks our hearts. I nodded slowly. I just thought love would mean I'd always have a place. So she sighed. "You do, sweetheart. just not always in the way you imagined. Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I wrote in my notebook again, maybe love isn't about holding on. Maybe it's about learning to bless from afar. The next few months slipped by gently. The trees turned golden, the air grew cooler, and I found myself walking into town more often. The shopkeepers knew me by name again, and the librarian started setting aside books she thought I'd like. I was beginning to feel useful again, present, like I had a place in the world beyond my son's home. Then one afternoon, just as I was watering the small patch of daisies by the porch, I heard a car pull up. I looked up, squinting against the sun, and there he was, Daniel, standing by his car, holding a bouquet of flowers, looking exactly like the boy who used to run to me after school. For a moment, I couldn't move. Mom, he said, softly smiling, you didn't think I'd forget where you live, did you? I laughed through tears as I walked toward him. I wasn't sure you remembered. He hugged me, not the quick, polite hug from before, but a long, tight embrace that felt like it came from somewhere deep. I'm sorry, he whispered. I closed my eyes. For what, sweetheart? For everything, he said. For letting things get the way they did, for not saying enough. For not stopping her that day. I pulled back gently, looking at him. His face was older now, more serious. But his eyes, those same soft brown eyes, still carried that kindness. You don't have to be sorry, I said. You have a good life. You have love. That's what I always wanted for you. He looked down, his voice barely a whisper. It doesn't feel right without you. I smiled. It's not supposed to feel right all the time. That's how we learn what matters. We sat together on the porch, just like we used to when he was younger. He told me about his new job, about Emma, about how they were settling into their house. He said they'd planted a small garden out back, tomatoes, herbs, a lemon tree. She says you inspired her. He added with a small grin, she finally learned to cook your stew. I laughed softly. Then I did something right. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Air smelled like rain and soil, the kind of peace that comes after long storms. Mom, he said, finally, we want you to come visit, maybe stay for a few days. Emma wants to talk to you. My heart ached with both hope and caution. Are you sure? He nodded earnestly. She's been thinking about everything. She misses you too. I didn't know if that was entirely true, but I saw sincerity in his eyes, and for me, that was enough. A week later, I found myself standing at their doorstep again. The same house, the same door, but it felt different this time. I knocked softly. Emma opened it. For a second, we both just stood there. She looked nervous, unsure. Then she said, Mom, please come in. The word mom caught me off guard. It had been so long since she'd said it. I stepped inside. The house looked brighter, warmer somehow. There were small changes, a few new photos on the walls, fresh flowers on the table, the faint smell of cinnamon. It felt lived in. Loved, she gestured toward the kitchen. I made tea the way you used to. I smiled. You remembered? She nodded. I did. We sat together, the air a little awkward at first. She fidgeted with her cup before finally saying, I owe you an apology. I looked at her surprised. You don't owe me anything, dear. I do, she said firmly, her voice trembling slightly. I was selfish. I thought having you here meant I was losing space, losing control. I didn't realize I was losing something else. Your kindness, your wisdom, the way you made this house feel like home. I was scared and I took it out on you. I felt a lump in my throat. You were young. I said gently, marriage is hard, sharing space is harder. She smiled weakly. Still, I hurt you. I reached across the table and took her hand. You didn't hurt me, dear. You just reminded me that love changes shape. It doesn't disappear. It just finds a new rhythm. Tears filled her eyes. You're too kind. No, I said softly. I just learned that forgiveness is lighter to carry than pain. Daniel came in then, wrapping his arms around both of us. For the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't felt since before, belonging. Not the kind that comes from ownership or duty, but from quiet acceptance. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, laughing, sharing stories. Emma asked for old recipes. Daniel showed me pictures from their last trip. The walls that once stood between us began to fade, brick by quiet brick. When the sun began to set, I stood by the window watching the golden light fill the room. It looked beautiful, the way life often does after all the storms. That night, before leaving, Emma walked me to the door. Promise you'll come again soon, she said. I smiled. You might get tired of me. She shook her head. Never again. As I stepped outside, I heard Daniel call from behind me, love you, Mom. I turned and smiled. I love you too, my son. The drive home was quiet, peaceful. The moon followed me all the way, and I felt my heart finally rest. Not because everything was perfect, but because I understood something I hadn't before. Love doesn't vanish when people change. It lingers quietly, waiting to be seen again. When I got home, I made tea, sat by the window, and opened my notebook. On the last page, I wrote, "Love is not about staying. It's about knowing when to step back and still be there when they look for you again. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's the strength that keeps love alive." And sometimes being a stranger in their story doesn't mean you've been forgotten. It just means you've become part of the background that holds it all together. It's been almost a year since that day, the day I left their house with a suitcase and a smile that hid my heartbreak. Sometimes I still wake up early, expecting to hear Daniel's footsteps, the hum of the coffee machine, or the sound of Emma's soft laugh. Then I remember those sounds belong to another home now, not mine, and that's all right, because life, I've learned, doesn't stop giving us homes. It just gives us new kinds. Some are made of walls and roofs. Others are made of memories, of laughter that still echoes even when the room is empty. My home now is smaller, quieter, but it holds peace, the kind that comes after the storm. The mornings start with sunlight spilling gently across the floor. I brew my tea, sit by the window, and watch the world wake up. Birds come to rest on the old fence. Children walk to school, backpacks bouncing. The neighbor's dog barks just like clockwork. It's ordinary, but it's enough. I still talk to Daniel every week. Sometimes he calls from his office, sometimes from the garden where Emma is planting new flowers. He always says, "We miss you, Mom," and I believe him now, not because the words sound perfect, but because I can hear the truth in his voice. Last Christmas, they came to visit. They brought a box of gifts, but the real gift was the warmth that filled my house again. Emma helped me cook, laughing when she spilled flour on her dress. Daniel fixed the squeaky door I'd been ignoring for months. When they left, they hugged me tight, not out of guilt, not out of duty, but out of love, real simple love. After they drove away, I sat by the fire and smiled. Sometimes you don't get the ending you dream of. You get the one that heals you instead. There are moments when I still feel that ache, a small, quiet pain when I see other families together, mothers surrounded by children and grandchildren. It's a reminder, not of loss, but of love's strange way of changing form. We raise them to fly, but when they finally soar, the silence feels louder than we expected. Still, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because love, real love, is not about keeping people close. It's about letting them grow and still being proud, even from a distance. I remember once years ago, my husband told me something I didn't understand until now. He said, "One day our son will love someone more than he loves us. And when that happens, don't be sad. That means we did our job right." He was right. I did my job. And though it broke my heart for a while, it also made it stronger. Now, when I think of Emma, I no longer see the young woman who asked me to leave. I see someone who was learning, just like I was, learning how to share love, how to protect her space, how to become a wife, and someday maybe a mother herself. I hope when that day comes, she remembers me kindly. I hope she understands the weight and beauty of motherhood, how it's made of both holding on and letting go. Tonight, the rain has started again. It taps softly against the window, the same way it did that morning I left. But it feels different now, not lonely, just peaceful. The world outside glows in silver light, and my heart feels full. I close my notebook, the one filled with my thoughts, my quiet confessions, and place it on the table beside my husband's old watch. It stopped ticking, but somehow I like it that way. It reminds me that time doesn't have to move to be alive. Some moments, some loves, stay forever still, yet they keep beating inside us. I whisper a small prayer before bed, not asking for anything, just thanking for the love I had, the lessons I learned, and the strength that came from being broken and rebuilt by kindness. And as I turn off the light, I think about the morning sun that will rise again, steady and forgiving over every heart that's ever felt like a stranger in their own story. Because that's the truth of it. We are never truly strangers to love. We just learn to meet again in new places, new faces, and sometimes even in ourselves. Fade out, soft piano, music rises, gentle and reflective. The sound of rain fades into morning bird song. Narrator's final line, softly, when my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. And now I finally understand why, because even goodbye can be an act of love.